Hey everyone, it is Meg from the Teacher Studio, here today to have a little conversation about planning book clubs. Now, if you're like me, you recognize the value of having students engaged in meaningful book clubs at different points throughout the year. Now, some teachers are firm believers in having book clubs going at all times. Some do different cycles throughout the year, which is what I do. I do a number of different rounds, and then I also do book clubs as needed for a more of an intervention or a challenge level. So where I don't have the whole class going, but I might have one or two groups going. But a few times a year, I do have my entire class engaged in book clubs, and I often tie it to something specific we're working on, perhaps historical fiction, or right now, social issues book clubs. But as you know, to have 24, or some of you I know have way more students than that, engaged in book clubs takes a lot of planning, organizing, getting things structured and set ahead of time. So I have a few tips I'd like to share with you on how I make it all more manageable. Okay, the first thing I want to talk about is the fact that you do not have to do book clubs on chapter books. They don't have to be long. You can use picture books. You can even use a read aloud book that you're using with the whole class where you practice the skills you need to have good discussions with a shared text. For example, when I read the book, The Tiger Rising, I use that opportunity with my students to practice all the things I need them to do and to understand about book clubs before we try that using their own independent books. We practice being prepared for a group. We practice how to use accountable talk stems with each other, how to take turns, even how to sit and face each other so that we know that we are actively engaged and not a disruption. We practice all of those things with the book that I'm sharing with them to kind of free them up from the other work so that they can practice those skills. This totally helps them when they are ready to do their own book clubs later in the year. So if you haven't tried that, give that a shot. The other thing you can do is you can do book clubs where multiple groups have the same book. So perhaps you have multiple copies of a book like Tiger Rising, or I know a lot of people like to do books like Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing or something at the beginning of the school year. That's a perfect time to practice book clubs by using a shared text. Now, why this is important is that it allows students to only focus on the structure of the book clubs and how to do book clubs before you put them into a more challenging situation. You can set your expectations, and in fact, one thing I really like to do is a fishbowl approach. So I find a group that I know is working really well, and we watch them have a book club. We talk about how they could improve it, but specifically, we make an anchor chart that says what a good book club should look like and sound like, so that when it's their turn to do it, they have something very concrete that we can refer to. We can also use that to help us self-assess after each book club. Okay, so now I've got another tip for you. Okay. So often I see teachers just scrambling to get things ready. They might have 5 or 6 different books going on in their room, and they're putting together packets of comprehension questions and all of that. You don't need to do that. You don't need to have a whole bunch of work that is specific to that text. Instead, find ways where you can have students track certain information that you can model, and then they go practice. This can be something that can be used with any text. For example, if you're tracking character traits or character struggles or how characters change, that doesn't matter if you are using a book like Fish in a Tree or you're using a book like Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing or Tiger Rising. All of your groups could be reading different books. You can still teach the same mini lesson to the whole class, and then when they go back to their group, they can be having discussions on that topic. As they read, you can ask them to focus on those things. It's even fun to come back as a whole class and talk about how the books are different. So without doing 6 different lesson plans or 6 different packets, you can still have kids reading books at their just right level and having really, really meaningful discussions. So there are a ton of things that you can do in this format. Tracking the events of a chapter, making predictions, retelling and summarizing, looking at character dialogue. There are so many ways that you can teach a lesson. You can model with a picture book or your read aloud novel, and then send them away to their book clubs to give it a try on their own. Okay, so I know one question that teachers always have is, well, how will I keep my students accountable if they don't have to answer questions? And the answer is really simple. You have a lot of options. I apologize. Someone just jumped up on my lap. Thanks, Ruby. I'm going to keep her here. You can still have kids do writing about their text, talking about their text, and so on without just doing fill-in-the-blank work. So whether you create maybe a T-chart of notes in their notebook where they're tracking events and then doing their reflections on it, whether you're having them use Post-it notes where they're flagging important parts that they can then talk about, whether you're having them find 3 examples of what a character said that was really important or making predictions, you can have them do all that work to bring to group to help prepare for the group without it being in packet form. In fact, I think when I talk to my students about book clubs, I say when grown-ups have book clubs, and grown-ups do have book clubs, this might be what they do. They might flag a part in their book, or they might take some notes, but nobody's making a worksheet for them where they have to necessarily fill out the questions and bring it to group. Now, if you do need students to be more accountable and you really want to make sure that they're understanding the book, then you can ask some very specific things. Ask them to retell a section or to write a summary. But this shouldn't take that much time. You don't need to get into every nitty-gritty detail of all the chapters in a text. We don't want to kill the love of reading. We want students to enjoy reading and learn how to enjoy discussing the books. I think it's really important, and we often forget this piece. We forget to stop when our book clubs are finished and do some reflecting. You know, what went well? What didn't go so well? What are our goals for next time? Was participation balanced? What do we need to do to encourage those who are more reluctant sharers to share? For those students who tend to over-dominate a conversation, what is their role? And when you have these discussions as a whole class, it can be so powerful. And for me, when I do a round of book clubs, I typically have them meet 5 to 6 times, so approximately every other day. So from the first book club meeting to the final one, I'm expecting growth. And so when we take the time after each club to reflect, both in the group and as a whole class, I definitely see the progress from start to finish. You can even work either as a class or within each group to set up kind of their expectations, what their group norms are about participation, about being prepared, and so on. And then you can cross-check after each meeting. How did they do? Did we feel good about that? What are we going to do next time? So if you are thinking, I've been working a little too hard when I plan my book clubs, take some of these suggestions and give them a try. Now, if you need some more help, I do have a number of blog posts that kind of go into more detail about how I plan some of my book groups. I also have a number of resources in my store that can help with the planning. I have different templates and slides and so on that can just be copied and pasted. For example, the book clubs I'm doing right now, my social issues book clubs, I have 7 groups in my class. They literally all have the same template. Each meeting is one slide that they're working on and then discussing, and then we're coming back whole class to talk about it. I literally set the whole book club system up in about 40 minutes, start to finish. So if you're interested in that, check out the information in my profile, and let's see if we can't take some of the stress off and make these book clubs really powerful and meaningful for all our students. Thank you, and we'll see you soon.